Good afternoon and welcome to episode 4 of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy Barker. I'd like to thank you for joining, and as a reminder, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Please download and rate. It makes it a lot easier for others to find the podcast, and please don't hesitate to share. We'd like to get this out to as many new listeners as possible. You can also go to our website at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter. That way we can notify you as each new podcast comes out. If you'd like to find out more about me and my services that I offer, you can find me at roybarker.com or reach out to me at roy@roybarker.com. Today I'm excited to have Marty Ramseck as a guest. As all of you, most of you know anyway, employee retention is a huge passion of mine. I feel like it's something that not only to help our bottom line, but also to pay attention to our customers. I feel like it's very important that we not only hire, but we retain the best possible talent we can. In 2016, Marty joined PI Midlantic as a senior consultant with the focus on helping companies and sales professionals to reach exceptional results. Marty has cultivated 30 years of experience in hands-on sales management and double-digit growth in every one of his ventures. Marty, he figured out that the advantage was to find exceptionally strong matches in recruiting, training, and individual coaching using the Predictive Index, and that is what the PI in PI Midlantic stands for, is Predictive Index. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Roy. Good to be here.
If you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about how you got here, and then you can tell us a little bit about the Predictive Index, and we can go from there.
Yeah, for many years, I've been VP of sales of companies, running sales teams, and being a part of that for many years, I use the Predictive Index very much so. Has been a big help for me in my career and getting the results that I've been able to get. And a year and a half ago, I had an opportunity as PI Midlantic expanded to California, is to join them and really start growing their business out here in California. So I've been working exclusively with Predictive Index as a senior consultant for the last year and a half, and I've been basically using PI for the last 20 years in different companies as VP of sales.
Okay, great. And as we talk about employee retention, I think to me, one of the biggest concerns are always on the front end, the hiring, the screening, and the onboarding. Of course, there's always the back end of the things that we can do, building a good company culture in order to hang on to employees and many other things that go with that. But I guess to start the conversation, let's talk about recruiting, and let's talk about, well, first off, tell us a little bit about the Predictive Index, kind of how it works, how you would get started, and then we can talk a little bit about how it pertains to the recruiting process.
Yeah, let me tell you a little history, because I think that will give you a good idea of how we got to where we're at today. Predictive Index was actually started after World War II. Our founder, Arnold Daniels, was commissioned by the Air Force to study why, under stressful conditions, certain pilots were better at being fighter pilots and certain pilots were better at being bomber pilots. And they were looking at, the pilots got the same training, same equipment, but under stress, some were crashing and burning as fighter pilots, some were crashing and burning as bomber pilots. And that's kind of how Predictive Index got started, because if you look at the behaviors you need as a fighter pilot, it's more of, your head's on a swivel. There's no real flight plan when you go up there. It's kind of like that old movie by Tom Cruise, Top Gun, where they're kind of reacting and adapting to what's up there to either hit the enemy or avoid being hit by the enemy. Then you look at the behaviors needed as a bomber pilot. You're looking at exact behaviors where you follow an exact flight plan. You drop the bomb at the exact spot, then you fly a flight plan back to the ship. So the Air Force really wanted to look at how, based upon giving the same training, same equipment, based upon behavior, who was better suited as a fighter pilot or better suited as a bomber pilot. So that, and they wanted to have a short assessment to be able to do that. So Predictive Index actually entered the workforce back in 1955. And what it is, it's a short assessment that takes you about 6 minutes to complete, where you go in and you just look at words that you feel that those are the words that are associated with you. And from that, it'll give a behavioral pattern that will tell you what your behavioral strengths are in terms of what you bring to the job, in terms of your behavioral strengths to the job. And that's the way it works. So it's about a 6 minute assessment that helps us determine what type of behaviors that a person will bring into the work environment.
Okay, and as we talk about that, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there are two key aspects. It's not only finding talent that will be a good match for your team and for your company and your culture, but I think it can, if I'm not mistaken, I think it will also give you some insight into behavioral aspects and maybe how you communicate or what role in the company that the prospect might be best suited for.
Yeah, so what Predictive Index does is, number one, it's a tool you want to use for hiring. You look at when you hire somebody, you're looking at, we call it three buckets. The first bucket is what they have on their resume or their LinkedIn profile. It's their education, it's their knowledge, it's their skill set, it's their work history, and we consider that the briefcase, right? The second part, what you're looking at, is what we consider the heart. And those are kind of the soft skills of honesty, or they have the integrity that they need in the role, the work habits they need in the role, the discipline that they need in the role. And if you look at those two things, those are both really choices that a person makes in life. I choose the knowledge I gain. I choose where I want to work. I chose my skill sets. And my values, I choose to be honest every day. I choose to work hard every day. I choose to have integrity every day. But then the third bucket of what you're looking for is what behaviors do they have for the job. Every job has certain behaviors that you must have to be successful. In sales, because that's what I'm familiar with, but in sales, you need some sales reps, you need the behavior of the ability to go knock on doors all day. Or some sales jobs, you have to have the ability to build relationships and grow accounts. And those are behaviors that are really tied into someone being successful in sales or not being successful in sales. So there's three areas what you want to look at when you hire. What's on the briefcase, or the resume, their value, behaviors for the role. And I always felt, especially in sales, that if I can get the behaviors right, I could teach somebody how to sell. Selling is not rocket science. Yeah, it's a skill set, but it's not a rocket science. So I felt I could always teach somebody how to sell, but I had to get the right behaviors together. If they didn't have it in them to cold call, they weren't going to be successful in a role that was a cold calling type role. So you look at Predictive Index, that's 50%. I got the hiring right. I bring the person on, but then when they're on board, it's as important to I work with them based upon their behavioral strengths. I communicate with them based upon their behavioral strengths. I give them opportunities to play to those strengths, so they're coming in engaged every day. I think Gallup did a study a few years back and asked, what is the most important thing about coming to work? Well, number one, the most important thing that employees wanted was they know what they had to do every day. They know, what was expected of them. But number two is they came to work and they did what they did best. And that's what Predictive Index comes in, is I'm having people come in and behaving in a way that they behave to their strengths and do what they do best every day.
Right, and I think that's a great example you bring up is the cold call. And I worked for Morgan Stanley for a while, and that's the way you start. You're thrown into a bullpen with 20 other people, and you just dial. I mean, there are a lot of names for it, dialing for dollars, but basically you sit there and you make 200 phone calls a day. And I would see a lot of people come in. They would start out really strong for a day or two, and then on day 3, you could see, the enthusiasm started waning. They were tired of getting no's. They were tired of having to explain themselves or getting hung up on. There's a lot of emotions and psychology that goes along with a job like that. But, one thing that we would notice as well, because we had, this was really pre-internet, so we had a contraption that it would track the numbers, the length of the call, give us a little statistics on what was happening. And one thing we would notice is all of a sudden, the weaker guy might start calling, his mother, his sister, calling 7-Eleven,
Right.
and he would call people who he called people who he knew that they weren't going to pick up the phone. He knew they were going to get a voicemail, so he didn't have to have any interaction or
Right.
trying to break down those barriers. So it's very important, and I'm assuming if you were hiring for that type of, well, for any type of sales, but let's just go with that one. If you were hiring for that kind of sales, if I put them through the predictive index assessment, I would, at the end, you would be able to tell me if they were going to be suited for a job like that, or even for one that may be outside sales where they're actually knocking on doors and going into businesses repeatedly every day.
Yeah, and that's a great example, Roy. And that goes back to, that person not making the call. It wasn't what there was on a resume that was causing them not to make the call. It wasn't their values per se. It was their behavior. They weren't hardwired to do that. And Predictive Index looks at 4 behavioral drives that we have, and the one drive that it looks at is it's a person's dominance, and that's their drive to control or to exert influence on their environment. And a person with a higher dominance, who scores higher dominance on the Predictive Index assessment, is more hardwired internally to do cold calling. It doesn't faze them as much. They can handle more rejection. They can knock on doors. They're the people that are calling you at night trying to sell you a timeshare, and you can say anything to them, and they just keep dialing and dialing, coming. And that's just a behavioral hardwire that some people have in them. If they don't have it in them, they're probably better at more of the old school farmer type of sale, where they're good at building accounts once they're there, growing the accounts once they're there. But the account has to be established, and we can determine that on the predictive index of how dominant a person is and how much you're hardwired, like a fighter pilot or a bomber pilot, how well they're hardwired to be a cold caller.
Right, and I think this is a good time to make the point that, in my opinion, the index doesn't necessarily mean that this is a good hire or a bad hire, as much as it means, are they suited for this position? And kind of give you an example, we had a guy that came in, and he was very well educated, good school, nicest guy ever, but he just couldn't handle the cold calling. After a couple days, he was just done, and he was fixing to quit. But what we noticed in him was that he was very good on the operational side, and so he was moved in from more of the sales position to the ops side, where he worked with the other brokers and solving problems and worked with clearing, and he was good with people, and he excelled and was probably one of the best ops managers that there ever was. And so I guess if you could expound on that, is that I guess that the index can maybe bring show you some things that, yes, you just don't want this guy's attitude at your company, but also if you use it correctly, it might can just show you that who might be suited for what position versus employee or no employee.
Yeah, it's we always say with predictive index, no one's ever tested their way to success. It's predictive index is, again, part of the whole process, that you have to have whatever role, the right skill sets, the right knowledge, and the right values in that role. And all predictive index does, from a hiring perspective, it gives you a better target to shoot for. Because think about it, every job has behaviors that you're requiring that person to do. And some of those behaviors may be social behaviors that they're requiring them to do. Some of those may be task-focused behaviors. Some of those may be process behaviors. Some of those behaviors may be crossing your T's and dotting your I's. So all jobs have behaviors. What we're trying to do with predictive index is, as much as possible, match that person's behaviors to the job's behaviors, that we're putting the person, that they do what they do best every day. If they're a people person, keeping them around people all day. If they're a task person, having them do tasks all day. All we're trying to do is match the job, those behaviors of the job, with that person, so they're coming into work and doing what they do best every day, which means they're more productive, they're more successful, and they're more engaged as an employee.
And for full disclosure, Marty did administer this the assessment on me and was pretty much right on. I was very surprised that it was very short, very quick, but the results were good. So, how do you gauge success, and or what would you say the success rate is of the assessment? Is it easy for someone to game it? Can you go in it with the mindset of this is the way I'm going to try to focus my answers in order to manipulate it, or is that a lot more difficult than what it sounds?
Yeah, that's a great question, Roy. And we do about 3 million assessments a year. And what that allows our scientists to do is to really scrub the data to make sure what we say we're measuring, we're actually measuring. And it's almost impossible to, number one, to manipulate the predictive index for a couple of reasons. Number one, that person doesn't know predictive index. When you complete a predictive index, it basically completes a pattern of you on 4 drives. It completes a pattern on your dominance, which is a drive for control of one's environment. It's the second drive is extroversion, and that's the drive for people and social. The third drive is the drive of patience or familiarity and stability in one's environment. And the fourth drive is formality, which is the drive for getting things done right in one's environment. So when a person goes in, they don't know what you go in. You'll pre-choose words on an assessment and just say, am I this word or am I not this word? And it's almost impossible to manipulate it because, number one, you don't know what pattern that company is looking for in terms of for that particular job. Every job has a pattern what you want to look for. You don't know which pattern they're looking for in that particular role. The second thing is the words you don't choose as much as the words you choose go into completing that PI pattern by an algorithm in terms of what that pattern is. So, the words you don't choose have as much going into the pattern as the words you do choose. And not all words are created equal. So words have different meanings to words have patterns. So it's almost practically impossible to get it to manipulate it from that standpoint.
Okay. And you say that it's set up for different positions or different companies. You may not know the words or phrases that they're looking for. So let's just say I come to you today and say, you know what, I really want to use this in my next hire. Is this pretty standardized that we talk about my position in my company and you say, okay, I've got, this is kind of the path we need to go down? Or is each test specifically designed for that company and exactly what that role is for them?
Yeah, it's really designed for that company. And back to your original question before, Roy, the real reason why you use Predictive Index is to get better results for your company. At the end of the day, it's a great tool. You learn a lot about yourself, and your self-awareness. But at the same time, as a company, you want to get the Predictive Index as you want to improve your results, revenue, bottom line, so forth. But in terms of how we use it, there's 2 assessments that a company uses Predictive Index. The first one is what we've been talking about is the individual behavioral assessment, which all people can do and find out what their Predictive Index is. Then we have each one of our clients that we work with, for every position in the organization, they complete a job assessment, which is a little bit different than a behavioral assessment, where they go in and they'll look at phrases of what they're looking for in that particular role in terms of behaviors that they're looking for in that role. And we recommend that 3 to 5 people that are in the interview cycle or process for that particular hire fill out a job assessment and really go in and look at behaviorally what are you looking for in that role. And from that, when they do that, a pattern will come out and says, this is a pattern that you think that you're looking for this particular role. So that's phase 1. The second thing that they do is that if they have top producers in that role, we will do a talent analytic on their top producers to see what the patterns of their top producers look like in that particular role, and then look at consistencies between the top producers and what they came up with the job pattern to come up with the ideal pattern which you're looking for in that particular role. So every company that we work with and every job that they have, we have what we call a job assessment for what they're looking for behaviorally in that particular role to match it closely to each individual organizational's needs.
Okay. And it brought up a thought that I used to work with an organization that relied heavily on volunteers, and the unfortunate part was these volunteers could actually, if we weren't careful, they could extract some revenge on the organizations that they were working with and supposed to be helping. And so we were, very careful about screening them to find out their motives on why they wanted to volunteer and kind of what their background had been. And it was surprising every now and then it would come out that, yeah, I'm just here to try to extract some punishment on this company. And so, excuse me, we could, we knew to call them immediately, but let's just go back and say, okay, I run this volunteer organization. Could we do the same thing with the volunteers, as maybe look at some of the better performing volunteers that we have and draw some conclusions, and then do the predictive index on the prospective volunteers going forward?
Yeah, you could do that. You're looking at, what volunteers, what behaviors are those volunteers that are successful in those roles? What does their predictive index looks like? To, do a little talent analytics on that, and then say, okay, look for consistencies among your top performers and say, we need these behaviors of people that we're hiring. But one step back, Roy, one thing, predictive index looks at a person's behavioral, drives and where they're strongest behaviorally. It doesn't assess their integrity or their honesty. It's not an integrity test. It's strictly a behavioral assessment.
Okay, yeah, and that's a good point to remember. So, as we go through the hiring process, the timing of events, there's a lot of things that we need to do, and a lot of things will tell us different things. And so there's always some debate. And let's just say checking references. There's some people that say, well, I want to check references prior to the interview in case something comes up. Then there's some people that say, well, I don't want to go through the time to reach out to people if they fail the interview, so we wait till after. Is there a perfect time to perform the assessment on prospects that you may be hiring?
Yeah, I think, my experience and what I coach my clients on, Roy, is to do it earliest in the process as possible. And for me, that is, if I get a resume in, I review the resume, and generally most folks want to set up for timing, want to set up a phone interview. As soon as I get the resume and I like what I see on the resume, I will set up a phone interview. In between the time of setting that phone interview up into doing the phone interview, I'll have them complete a predictive index. And one of the beauties of predictive index is that it only takes a candidate about 6 minutes to complete, so it's not a huge investment of time on their part for us to get all that information. Because when I interview them, I want to look at their skills, I want to look at their knowledge, I want to look at their their work history, but I also want to interview based upon the behaviors I'm looking for in the role, and we call it interviewing to the behavioral gaps, right? And we can use the example of a cold caller. If I'm looking for a cold caller, but the predictive index is showing me that they don't have that behavior in them, I'm not just going to toss them away. I'm going to behaviorally interview them to see if they've cold called before, if they have been successful cold calling before, to see if they can close the gap between what their PI is saying about them to what I'm actually looking for in the job. Most times it doesn't, and it kind of comes out in the interview, but I will give them the opportunity to do that with behavioral-based questions during that initial interview. But I want to introduce the predictive index as soon as in part of the process as possible, because if they're not right for the role, I don't want to waste my time, and I don't think it's fair to the candidate to put them through several interviews to find out behaviorally they may not be right. So I think it's a win-win. If they're right for the role, then we'll continue the process. If not, we can eliminate that, and they can look at other opportunities that might be better suited for them. So it saves them time, and it saves us time.
Okay. And when you administered this on me, I assume that is the same way that it would go for a candidate. I was able to log in, do it online, and then you received the results fairly
Hmm.
instantaneously. So as a hiring manager, I've reviewed the resume. Maybe I did a quick phone screen. I really like this guy. I could. It would be set up where I would just give him a link. He would log in. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of walk through how does that process look like from sitting in an HR chair.
Yeah. So the way it works is, it's an easy thing for the administrator to do. All I need to do is put their first and last name into our software and put their email address, and I send out the predictive index to them. There's directions there that they read. They go in and they complete the predictive index, and I know as soon as they complete it, I know when it's completed, so I can go look at their results. From an HR perspective, the key with predictive index and EEOC is the EEOC is looking for people, just making sure that the interview process is fair, and that's why everybody that I recommend that everybody you interview you do the same process with everybody, because that's what the EEOC is looking for, that you're running a fair interview process. And I think by doing the PI up front, it's a fair interview process. With every candidate that I choose to interview, they get the same process in terms of before I talk to them on the phone, they're getting completing the PI. But we have a software that is part of the Predictive Index program that allows us to go in, send the PI, review the results, and also compare it to the job pattern we're looking for, and do an analytic in terms of our top performers and what that looks like also.
Okay, and what is the timing? Once you send them the link, they go through, and you said it takes about 6 minutes, but they go through, answer the questions, and then do those results then go to you, and then you pass them to the hiring manager, or would that be something that pops up on their screen as an email or some kind of a notification?
Yeah, yeah. So everybody that has a Predictive Index program, and they've been trained on PI. They have access to our software, so they're able to send and receive predictive indexes. So when they send one out, they'll get an email as soon as a person completes it live time that person has completed the PI, and they're able to go into our website and to look at what the results of that PI is.
Okay. So do do people change? I took this. It's been a few months ago since I went through it. Let's say next year, 2 years from now, I'm looking at going to work for a company that wants to perform. Is there going to be some variation? Does this change with life, things that happen to us in life, with our attitude, or is it pretty much going to have the same results from one year to the next?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's we're all changing in life, but behavior is kind of hardwired in us. We have these behaviors that create needs, and our behavior, or we have these drives that create needs, and our behavior is a response to that. And that's kind of internally how we're hardwired throughout our lifetime. And our scientists will say it very rarely changes unless a real major event happens to you. A person's behavior very rarely changes. It's kind of like I have hazel eyes. I had hazel eyes at 18. I have them today, and if I'm around for then it's kind of how I'm hardwired by eye color. Behavior is kind of hardwired the same way in people. You generally stay the same behaviorally throughout your lifetime.
Okay. Okay. Great. So, we've talked a lot about doing, performing the assessment on the front end on the hiring, but this is
Mm-hmm.
also a good tool to use with your current employees as well. If you may have somebody who you're having difficulty communicating with, or they're having difficulty in a particular job, and so there is some value to performing it with your existing staff to understand them better. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a huge value because it really helps you understand how to motivate them, how to communicate with them, how to best understand why they behave. It's really a study of human behavior, why they behave the way they do. And let me give you an example, Roy. For the sports fans out there, if you remember, there's a women's basketball coach by the name of Pat Summitt, who is the University of Tennessee's women's basketball coach and is the winningest women's basketball coach in the history of women's basketball, NCAA women's basketball. And Pat Summitt was a huge believer in PI. In fact, in her book, Reach for the Summit, she has a whole chapter dedicated to PI and how she used PI with her basketball players. And here's an example how she would use PI, and you can do the same thing in the workforce, right? At the end of the game, Tennessee had one shot left. Her point guard, which for folks that don't know, point guard on the basketball team is kind of like the quarterback on the football team, the catcher on a baseball team. They kind of call the shots out there, right? If she had a high dominance point guard, which means a high drive, high dominance, you think Kobe Bryant types, you think Michael Jordan types that have a high drive to control and dominate. She had a high 8 point guard. How she would communicate to them would be, what shot do you want to run at the end of the game? Okay, we're going to run that play. We're going to run that play. If you make the shot, you're a hero. If you miss it, you're a GOAT. On the other hand, if she had a low dominance point guard who is not as dominant, who is more seeking harmony, working well with other people, her communication style would be totally different. To a low 8 point guard, she would say, last shot of the game, here's what we're going to run. If we make it, we win as a team. If we miss it, we lose as a team. So just on that drive alone, she was able to communicate most effectively to a person with high dominance and a person with low dominance to put them in the best way that they can be successful and communicate to them motivationally wise what really resonated with them in terms of doing their best behaviorally in terms of how she communicated with them. And that's the same thing you can do with current employees in terms of how you challenge them. Is it more of an individual challenge with them, or is it more of a team challenge? And recognition. Do the person like public recognition for all things, or are they more private recognition? We all like to be recognized, but we like to be recognized in different ways. Some of us like public recognition. Some of us like private recognition. So those are little things you can do every day to keep your employees engaged as much as possible based upon their behaviors. And again, it's back to that thing, are they doing what they do best every day? And am I communicating with them as the way they want to be communicated every day? So I'm getting the best out of all my employees from a behavioral standpoint.
Wow, that's an interesting point, using it on a basketball team. I would have never thought of that. But that does kind of bring up the next question is, so we've talked a little bit about sales, and we've talked probably more about leaders in an organization, but is the PI something that you would want to use on every level of employee? If you have assembly workers on a factory line, is there going to be a value in performing it on every level, or are there only certain areas that you think that you would want to target within a company?
That's a great question. Obviously you want to target, the higher the level, the better, because those are positions that cost more when they turn over. They're more risky for the company if you lose a top performer in an executive position, and obviously a lot harder to replace. But as you get PI as part of your company, the more you can use it for all positions to get everybody engaged and doing a great job. It can do nothing but help your company. I mean, I don't think there's a CEO in the world that wouldn't want 100% of their employees doing what they do best every day, engaged. And you never know who they are, but they may have a little interaction with your customers, a lot of interaction, and I want to make sure that person that is interacting with my customers in any way is totally engaged in doing what they're doing, and everyone doing a great job. Even a assembly line worker, you could tell based upon their PI if they're better suited for doing assembly line work or other work based upon what does their PI look like. But just coming to work and doing what you do best every day, you want obviously your highest level people to be performing at a high level, but as PI grows within your organization, as many people as part of it, as to have everybody engaged, I think is going to increase your revenues and your bottom line profits.
Okay, great. Well, Marty, I certainly appreciate you being a guest today, and unless you have any parting words, I just wanted to say thanks for your time and all this great information that you've given us. And you might just want to tell the listeners how they could reach out if they want to talk to you further about this.
Yeah, my name is Marty Ramseck, obviously, and my email is mramseck at PI Midlantic.com. I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn and connect there and reach out to me there. My direct phone number is 545-8121 if you want to reach out there. And for all your listeners, Roy, today, if they give me a call and want to complete a PI, for anyone's listening to this podcast, I'm more than happy to do a PI at no charge for them, to do that for them at no charge. It's a $200 value that I would give to them at no charge for listening into the podcast and connecting with me.
Okay, great. We certainly do appreciate that, and I know the listeners will, and want to find out more about how they can put PI to work for their organizations. So again, Marty, thanks so much for being a guest, and I also want to thank the listeners. Appreciate y'all tuning in and listening to the program. Want to remind you that you can find us either on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, and you can go to the website at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com to sign up for our email or to learn more about how you could be a guest. And I'm always open to ideas from the audience of other topics that y'all would like to have covered. Until next time, wish everybody good luck and have a great weekend. Thank you.